the trailer for Star Wars The Acolyte dropped, and I'm not going to watch it because I'm onto you, Lucasfilm. I know you're going to try to copyright claim me. I know the Lucasfilm stuff gets immediately caught in the copyright thing. You know how I know? Because I have been playing Jedi Survivor, and YouTube keeps telling me that other people are stealing my content because they're also uploading stuff from Jedi Survivor. So I know that this stuff is in Content ID and is going to get caught. But we can talk about it. And I will be honest, watching the trailer, I wasn't super psyched for it. It was like, okay, yeah, it's more Jedi stuff. And it's our first live action foray into the High Republic era. I know there's a lot of books in there, and Jedi Survivor has a lot of High Republic stuff in it. It's their new era that they're trying to build out. But the showrunner for The Acolyte, Leslie Headland, she was the showrunner for Russian Doll, which I watched the first season, and I think I watched the first episode of the second season, but it had been several years between them, so I kind of lost interest. But the first season of Russian Doll, that is a really great creative show. A lot of fun, wacky stuff. So I'm interested to see what Leslie has here. And she did an interview with, actually I don't even know who it was. I've got it with The Hollywood Reporter, but I don't know if that's the original source for it, because I did see it on IGN too as well. But there was one thing in particular in the interview that I wanted to look at, and so here we go. Andor creator Tony Gilroy proves that you don't necessarily have to be a lifelong Star Wars fan to be a great Star Wars storyteller. So I thought you made a wise choice by having a varied writer's room with fans of different eras, and then someone who never flocked to it at all. And yes, yep, you are correct, chat. Abigail Thorne is in the show. I don't think she was in the trailer, but she was able to confirm. And we did know that beforehand because her agency website had her listed. It was like Ensign something was her character's name, but I think they weren't supposed to do that. It just, somebody messed up and put it up there, so it got leaked, but she wasn't able to officially confirm it until the trailer came out. Anyway, so that was the question that I just read, talking about having a varied writer's room with a writer who has not seen Star Wars. And Leslie says, yeah, I just thought it would be good to have the perspective of a person that had literally never seen Star Wars until she was in the room. And she said to me, why do you want me in this room? I've never seen Star Wars. I have no idea. I think there's a dog in it, but I don't know anything. And I was like, first of all, you're an incredible writer, but that's why I want you here. I want you to be questioning narrative. I don't want myself, who's a lifelong fan, to just be relying on particular references in order to create emotional beats. I want those emotional beats to be earned and checked by someone that isn't super familiar with it. That is so smart, because so much of the Disney Plus Star Wars stuff has been solely relying on nostalgia bait. Basically any of the Dave Filoni shows, if you haven't been watching the Dave Filoni cartoons, you're missing out on a bunch, because the live action shows just kind of assume that the people who are watching this were watching Clone Wars and Rebels, especially Ahsoka. Don't watch Ahsoka until you've watched Rebels. I just consider Ahsoka season 5 of Rebels. And so making sure that you are writing a show that makes sense both to diehard Star Wars fans and people new to the franchise, making sure that it doesn't rely too much on just established offhand knowledge, here's a character, you know who it is, we don't need to explain anything, or we know that the universe works this way because it was established in this movie, so we don't have to explain it, it can just happen. Having somebody in the writer's room who's like, well, hang on, I don't know why that is, or to point out, you're relying on that trope too much, and I think you need to shake it up. I think it's a good thing. And I saw people who were saying it's that's like asking a toddler for writing advice, and I'm like, they're a writer. You can be a writer and not have written for Star Wars or have seen a Star Wars and still be a good writer. So this has me excited. Cal Macau says, third of all, there's no dog in it. Sorry, Chewbacca is quite literally based on a dog, so you're wrong. Filoni sucks, I said it, fight me. Look, I like a lot of what Filoni does, but I think Filoni gets a little bit too insular in the way that he creates his shows, especially the live action stuff. I really like his cartoons, but also I have issues with the first couple seasons of Clone Wars. So yeah, Filoni, mixed bag. I like the dude, he's not a saint. That right there, that's the first thing that I wanted to talk about with the Acolyte, is that I am excited that they have a writer who doesn't know, but Leslie Headland herself is a huge Star Wars fan. Fan service is always a complicated subject with Star Wars, blah, blah, blah. By taking place a century before the Phantom Menace, does that inherently mean the show won't be loaded with cameos? She says, that's right, but for example, you'll see a little bit of Vernestra Woe from the High Republic novels. She ends up being live action for the first time, so that's definitely a cameo for that audience, I would say. You see a lot of cameos of alien species that I don't think I've seen in post-Disney live action, meaning a Zygerian Jedi and a half Thelan, half human Jedi. So there are species that you will see, but they aren't necessarily like, oh, it's that guy from that movie. Oh, it's that character from Return of the Jedi Special Edition. It's more like references to Star Wars that I think will excite fans, but they aren't the specifically named characters that exist there. There's also a lot of stuff from the EU that I got to utilize. Nobody stopped me, so I did it, laughs. So she's very clearly a die-hard, lifelong Star Wars fan. She knows what she's doing, and I have seen her do some really creative stuff here. And apparently the premise of the show is going to be kind of like a Rashomon type story where we're seeing different people's perspectives on what happened, because it's kind of like a murder mystery show. So I'm excited to see where it goes. The trailer itself didn't sell me on it. This interview sold me on it. But let's talk about somebody who has a different opinion. Hey, Star Wars Theory, my best friend in the world, the smartest man, the man who knows everything about Star Wars. What do you have to say for yourself? Everyone in the Acolyte who sees a red lightsaber has to die. If they don't, prequels canon breaks. Maul was the first Sith to be seen in 1,000 years. We'll see, maybe it'll be like a Rogue One situation where they all get offed. Now, that's possible that this show ends with everybody dying. Who knows? I haven't seen it. But Star Wars Theory has made the fatal error of assuming that red lightsaber means Sith. And you really don't have to work hard to explain to him that there is more to Star Wars than the Jedi and the Sith. Even when we are talking about the Force, there are dark side users who are not Sith, the Night Sisters of Dathomir. There are lightsaber users who are not Sith. Kylo Ren, not a Sith. And actually, if we're just like specifically red lightsabers, so I know in the old canon before the Disney acquisition, I think it was like a synthetic kyber crystal that gave the red color because the Sith did not have access to, is it Ilium? The planet that has the kyber crystals on it. But in post-Disney acquisition lore, the crystals, a red lightsaber is when a Force user has imbued their crystal with their rage and passion. It turns it red and it makes the blade more powerful. In fact, we have seen that in Star Wars Jedi Survivor when we meet Dagan Gera, a guy who has been in suspended animation since the High Republic, so, you know, during the time when there were no Sith. And what does he do when he wakes up?
My home, and they just expected me to throw it away.
Dagan, wait.
I refused to obey and was betrayed.
So you
by
can
the
see
one
it
I
started as
trusted
yellow,
most.
but then boom, he's enraged, and it turns red. And let's go back to Dagan, see what he does. Puts it back in his saber. And it's now a red lightsaber. Dagan Gera has been in suspended animation for 200 years. Dagan Gera is not a Sith. Dagan Gera is a Jedi who fell to the dark side because he became so attached to the idea of using Tanalorr, and the Jedi Council ignored his plans and basically rejected them, that his attachments got the better of him and he fell to the dark side. That doesn't make him a Sith. The Sith are not just anybody who has a red lightsaber or any dark side user. Again, the Night Sisters of Dathomir use the dark side, but they are not Sith. Dagan Gera was a Jedi, a dark Jedi, a fallen Jedi. But a fallen Jedi doesn't mean you're a Sith. In fact, even people who are trained by the Sith are not necessarily Sith. We have Asajj Ventress, who was trained by Count Dooku. She learned many of the arts of the Sith, but the rule of two stands, so she's not an official Sith, even though she's got two red lightsabers. And not all Sith even use red lightsabers. I think Exar Kun was a Sith. This might be EU Legends. I don't know a lot about him. I specifically remember Exar Kun because he was like the first guy in Star Wars lore to have a double-bladed lightsaber. This was before Phantom Menace even came out. In fact, when I saw the trailer for Phantom Menace, I thought Darth Maul might be Exar Kun, but I think he had blue lightsaber blades. And he was a dark side user. And Anakin Skywalker, when he first fell to the dark side, he didn't immediately imbue his lightsaber with... In fact, he lost that lightsaber. Obi-Wan took it, so he got a new one, and that's the one he turned red. So having a red lightsaber doesn't make you a Sith, and being a Sith doesn't mean you have a red lightsaber. So what Star Wars Theory saw was somebody killing Jedi who has a red lightsaber and assumed, oh, it's a Sith 200 years before they're supposed to have been seen again. Well, it's obviously not a Sith then, man. So, he's an idiot, but that out of the way, he had here linked a video where it literally is just him restating this tweet for like 4 minutes. We don't need to go over that. But he does have other things to say about the Acolyte, and I was curious to see what he had to say. I haven't watched this one. Leslie Talks Prequels and Acolyte. Oh boy is the name of the video. Begin.
Leslie Headland got interviewed for the Acolyte on IGN, and I was going through the actual interview. There's a lot I can't really say anything about because it seems actually pretty positive for the show. However, there are a few things that I'd love to read with you guys and address. By the way, it is currently my birthday. It is 2:55 in the morning. We're here. I was just working on the site for theorysabers.com, and now I'm making a couple videos.
I don't care about your Theory Sabers. Luna Rose says he's going to call it woke, isn't he? Well, I mean, like, if you want to make a drinking game of people complaining about Star Wars and complaining about woke stuff, like, your liver's just going to die. So, like, that's an easy guess. But, I don't care if he calls it woke. I want to see what he has to say.
For you guys. So this is how I want to spend my birthday. Honestly, it's the best way to chill, make videos, and make content for you guys. So, okay, despite these influences, the reporter says, you've also spoken about challenging the Star Wars universe. Do you think the Acolyte bears resemblance to other shows like The Mandalorian or Andor, or do you think it's unique? Leslie says, I think it's very different. We've utilized practical sets much more so than other shows.
I like the use of the practical sets. Andor didn't use the volume either. Andor shot on location or on practical sets, and I think they built that whole town. It was really good. Hopefully he thinks so as well.
I'm a big fan of that. George did a lot of practical sets as well.
Well, George did a lot of practical sets in the original trilogy. Like, if we get into the prequels, especially by episode 3, I think almost every single set was just like a green screen. So, yeah, George did a lot of practical sets back in the day when you had to do practical sets. But George isn't like somebody who's like, oh, it has to be practical. In fact, George was like, I remember George was pushing back on criticism of his over-reliance on like CGI characters, and he's just like, well, it looks just the same as a puppet. A puppet's not real either, ignoring the fact that there's certain, markers that like live action stuff shows that just gives it a little bit more verisimilitude. Is that the right word? I'm probably using the wrong word, but it feels more real because it is actually a physical thing existing in frame rather than something that they had to put in post and try and make sure that they match the lighting for it. So, like, I know he's gonna slob George's knob, even though George is not the genius that he thinks he is. But anyway, I could do this every time he brings up George Lucas, and I'd be here all day. Let's keep going.
Well as minifigures. And part of that just came out of necessity, and part of it was a creative choice. We utilized action in a way that I would say you see a lot of action in other shows, but I would say that because of the influence of samurai, Musha, and martial arts films. They become part...
Now, Musha, is this like a transcription error? I think she was saying wuxia, Wuxia, which is like kung fu movies. I don't know what Musha is. If that is something, somebody can correct me, but I think this is actually a transcription error. I think she's saying wuxia.
Part of the storytelling as opposed to an action sequence. I think that's something that's a little different. Each fight tells you a little bit more about the characters. I think stylistically, that's how they're different. All right, cool. Now get this.
Okay.
I'm also not sure how Jedi-centric the other shows are. Obviously, Ahsoka is. But we're looking at the Jedi as an institution, as a concept, as an entity that has amassed a lot of power. And that's kind of how it is in the High Republic. The
Okay.
Jedi are sort of at their peak somewhat in terms of their illustriousness and their sort of elegance. And that's good. I'm not saying that's wrong, but I do think that when Jodie Turner-Smith has that line at the end of the trailer when she says, it's not about good or bad, this is about power and who's allowed to use it, which I think is I don't really understand the line. I don't think it makes sense. Really?
I mean, we actually have a perfect example of what that means in a recent film adaptation of a famous book, Dune Part 2. Paul Atreides is, on paper, a good guy, a hero. He has all of the traits of being a hero. But the Dune books are there to critique power, that even the most, like, ideal, heroic, good person, when given power, is going to do bad with it. But, like, I understand that requires a deeper analysis of systems of power and sociological causes and effects. And I don't think that's, like, where his mental state is at. I could be wrong. Like, I don't know, maybe his head is twice as big as it is and he has to cram it all in on that hat. But something tells me it's probably a little bit too complicated for him.
I think that's the question we're asking. That's really the question. It's not, is somebody good, is somebody bad? There's an imbalance. Someone might be imbalanced morally, but if there's a power imbalance, how does that affect the power of Star Wars? And we've never seen the good guys outnumber the bad guys to this extent. I guess that's how it's different. So the last part there, I don't know what the heck she's talking about, because the prequel trilogy was literally over 10,000 Jedi against Darth Maul. That was it.
Well, no. I mean, sure, the Jedi always outnumbered the Sith, but it wasn't just Darth Maul. What's the name of that movie? It's one of your favorites. The Phantom Menace. Who is the Phantom Menace? It's Darth Sidious, who by the end of this film is Supreme Chancellor of the Galactic Republic. The most powerful man in the galaxy, you might say. So that's a significant power imbalance, right? Like, sure, he's outnumbered, but when she says we've never seen the good guys outnumber the bad guys to this extent, she's not just talking about outnumbered in terms of, like, the raw physical numbers. She is talking about in terms of the power of it. Whereas, like, the prequel trilogy is very much about how the Sith utilize their power to amass more power and subvert liberal democracy into fascism, right? And, you know, like in America, the fascists, the Trump fanatics, they aren't the majority. They're actually a really small percentage of the overall country population, but Trump still won in 2016 and did a lot of fascist shit. So, you know, it's not always about who has more numbers. It's about the power and what you do with that, right?
And then once we had Darth Maul slain and they were like, he's back, you know, the Sith are back, Voldemort's back, then we still had 10,000 Jedi against 2 Sith, one of which we didn't even know where he was, which was Palpatine.
Right, but who won? Who won that war?
Palpatine. Now, the idea of her saying that it's not about good or bad, I mean, I think Star Wars has kind of literally been about good or bad. It's...
Well, I mean, a lot of stories are about good or bad. That is a lot of basic storytelling. That doesn't mean that just because a theme has been present in the original work that it has to remain unchallenged and unexamined the entire time.
It's the power of good versus the power of evil, and which one is trying to take over the other. Sure, the Jedi always talk about the prophecy of the Chosen One bringing balance to the Force, but the Jedi didn't have a clue of what balance really meant. Balance meant, you know, 2 and 2. They thought balance meant you have 10,000 Jedi and no Sith.
What? That is such a simplistic view. No, like, George has always portrayed the dark side as being like an imbalance in the Force. That restoring balance to the Force means getting rid of the Sith. It's not like, oh, the balance is restored because now we have one Sith and one Jedi. Sidious and Vader both die at the end of Return of the Jedi, and it's just Luke. And, you know, Ahsoka is off somewhere too, and presumably some other Jedi who survived the Purge. You know, the expanded universe definitely undermines the whole line of when gone am I, the last of the Jedi you will be. But, you know, we can criticize that elsewhere. Restoring balance to the Force is about defeating the Sith. And we could get into an argument about whether balance actually means a balance between the dark side and the light. I think it would be interesting to tell a story about how the dark side doesn't necessarily mean evil. Certainly, it means that to the Jedi Order. You know, from my point of view, the Jedi are evil, or you know, if you want to get into that. But like, I like the elements of Star Wars when it examines the Force outside of the dogma of the Jedi and the Sith. They don't own the Force. They're just two religious orders with their own specific ideas about the Force. Night Sister Merrin from the Jedi Fallen Order and Jedi Survivor games. She's a dark side wielder, and she's like BFFs with Cal Kestis, a Jedi, because she uses the dark side in a completely different way than we have seen the Sith use it. And I like that. I like that kind of, examination of how a different culture would interact with the Force. And so while I think, like, if somebody's going around and killing Jedi with a red lightsaber, like, yeah, I'm going to say they're bad people. That seems fairly obvious. If you're running around with a red lightsaber, you are probably a fallen Jedi. Not a lot of non-Jedi get access to that kind of tech. But yeah.
Not balanced. And the Force answered back and said, no, this is ridiculous. It's not balanced at all. So what did they do? They had Luke and Leia. And they had 2 Sith and 2 Jedi. Yoda and Obi-Wan, Darth Vader, and Palpatine. And then, of course, Obi-Wan dies. Luke rises to become a Jedi. Then you have 2 and 2 once again.
God.
So this whole thing about good...
Is that seriously... Okay, but then... Is that seriously what he thinks is the balance of the Force? We have to have 2 Jedi and 2 Sith? Because, I mean, I know Ahsoka didn't exist when these movies were written, but she's out there. And I know you like Ahsoka. Not maybe the TV show, but the character, because I know you like Clone Wars. You love Dave Filoni. I don't know. That doesn't that doesn't make sense. That's not what restoring balance to the Force means. We could have an argument about it. I think that is a completely off read. I think that's a very simplistic read of what it means. Now, do I think George knew what he meant when he said restoring balance to the Force? Probably not. I don't think George is as smart as he wants to give him credit for being. I like George Lucas. I think he has a lot of creative ideas. I don't think he has the writing skill to necessarily pull them off in a good way, but I really don't think that was his intent. I don't think balance was, 2 and 2. Like, yeah, that doesn't make sense to me.
First bad is not really a thing in Star Wars. I mean, I don't really know where that's coming from. The whole point of the original trilogy when George wrote it is the fact that it's supposed to be about the rebels, who are these little guys rebelling against a massive tyrannical government like the Empire. And it was on the rebels. They're supposed to be the Vietnamese in the Vietnam War, and they're rebelling against America.
At least he acknowledges it this time.
America, essentially, and the oppression that they're putting on them. And so there definitely is a very big understanding of good versus bad in Star Wars. So to say that, it's not about good or bad, this is about power and who's allowed to use it, which, that line to me, I don't think any Jedi would even say that. I don't think any Jedi would ever even say that it's kind of like a gatekeeping thing, like, oh, those people aren't allowed to use this power. It's like, well, no, everyone can use the Force, but it depends how you use the Force. Not
so. I mean, well, I would say that the Jedi having edicts on how you are allowed to use the Force is like controlling people and telling people if they can use the Force or not. Like, again, we have seen in Star Wars canon that being a dark side user doesn't make you a bad person, because Night Sister Merrin, she's a good person and she uses the dark side. I just don't think he has the capacity to grapple with this kind of a philosophical question, because he has this very binary good versus evil mindsets to it, and he's either uninterested in or maybe afraid of examining more complicated stories than that. I mean, he didn't like Andor because it had bricks. among other things. So he very clearly has an issue dealing with higher ideas, I guess.
Who uses the Force? Now, in this case, what's the imbalance in the Acolyte? It's that there are, thousands of Jedi, and I guess now there are going to be just, again, one Sith, one dark side user, one
You
dark
don't know
Jedi,
it's a Sith.
one whatever. Now, I don't think it's a dark Jedi. I think it's literally a dark Force user, and I'm going to get into that in another.
Well, I think it probably is going to be a fallen Jedi or of some sort. But okay, I'm curious to see what his thoughts are.
Video. However, I wanted to talk about this and speak about this because I don't really understand, what she's meaning when she says that it's not about good or bad. So I don't really know. Maybe you guys can help me out in the comments. But
I can help you out now.
For me, I'm just a little confused. Now, this next one is also interesting. The Star Wars shows so far are fairly blatantly tied to other projects, but the Acolyte is set a long time before even the Phantom Menace. Does it have a start and stop story, or is there room for it to connect to other films and TV shows later? I think there's absolutely room for it to grow. I think that especially nowadays, I'm just the kind of person where I want to make sure a season feels like a legitimately whole story, and I definitely pepper in a lot of here's how it could go this way, it could go that way. We're going to hold her to this because there is so much filler in these shows that it is so difficult to watch. They stretch out what...
I actually agree with him. I don't like that Ahsoka ended basically on stay tuned for next season while we resolve a lot of these plot lines. I'm sure we're getting a season 2 of Ahsoka. I don't like that they ended it like that. I do like seasons having complete stories. I don't like shows ending on cliffhangers. And filler, I guess it depends. The shorter shows, like Kenobi, the ones that are only 6 episodes, there's not really much filler in that show, but there's also not enough time to let the characters breathe and have the story really build out. Andor, I think, is a really well-paced show. I don't think there's any filler in that show, although he would probably argue the breakfast scenes are filler, but I think showing the emasculation of Cyril is kind of important to his character. But yeah, no, a lot of the Disney Plus shows, there's filler. I haven't really watched the cartoons. I haven't watched Bad Batch, I should say. I've watched Rebels and the Clone Wars. But yeah, I haven't watched Bad Batch, so he knows better about Bad Batch than I do. Maybe there's filler in there, but anyway,
could be done in 2 to 3 episodes into an 8-episode season, and it's madness. So by her saying I think there's room for it to grow, I assume that she's meaning it can grow in either direction. We can go further before the Phantom Menace, or we can go right up into the Phantom Menace. And if they do that, I mean, you really at that point are starting to tread into Palpatine territory, Palpatine rising to political power, becoming a chancellor, and Plagueis, and then Dooku and Qui-Gon, and all of this and that in there. So it's that to me is a very interesting time. I don't know how that would turn out with her behind it. We have to watch The Acolyte and see, but I wouldn't really want her to touch that with a 10-foot pole just from her comments before.
Really? Which comments? The power ones? Because you didn't understand that? What's wrong with her? Have you seen any of her other work? I want to give him the benefit of the doubt that he isn't just I don't trust her because she's a whammon in Star Wars, but he's had sexist comments about whammon in Star Wars. He literally had... he had a conversation with a woman who was saying that Star Wars isn't for women because she'd never even seen it, and he was just nodding and smiling along. And he later said, I didn't agree with her at all, but he didn't give her any pushback. And actually, I watched Chariot do a video exposing how dishonest he was about all of that. So I don't know, maybe I shouldn't give him the benefit of doubt. Maybe I should assume that he doesn't want her to touch it because she's a woman.
Also don't want to leave the audience hanging emotionally. I want to leave them hanging narratively but emotionally. I want them to feel like they've watched a whole thing and then still have a bunch of questions at the end wait, now that I've learned this relationship exists, what's going to happen with those people? And now that this person has this type of power, what are we going to do about that? So I think it can definitely have some of that. That's
a good way to leave it. Have the narrative concluded, but have it open enough that you go oh, what could they do next season? Oh, this would be fun.
But this person has this type of power. What are we going to do about that? Okay, so clearly there's a probably very impatient person who has a lot of force abilities. or force latency. They train, and now they can exhibit force powers, and they're evil, and they're going to use it for whatever they want.
I don't think when she says power that she is just talking about power in the Force. There's other kinds of power. Like, Palpatine's main power wasn't even his Force ability, it was his political power. So when she says power, I don't think she's just talking about midi-chlorian counts, my dude.
And they're not going to be bound by the Jedi Code. That's interesting. We borrowed a lot from the High Republic in terms of the costuming. We thought it was really, really cool to start with what we called temple robes, which in the High Republic they're always used. But we thought it would be interesting if the white robes were the temple look, then the classic brown robes were what we've seen them in the often... I don't really care about this. You're the first woman to create a live-action Star Wars show. Hey, Deborah Chow, Bryce Dallas Howard. Can you explain how...
Deborah Chow directed Kenobi, but I don't think she was the showrunner for it. Bryce Dallas Howard directed a couple episodes of Mandalorian, but she didn't create that show. So you're wrong here. Sorry, you're wrong here.
How important that is, and if diversity was a big focus while casting too. God. These questions just bug me.
Okay, so he's just complaining because he thinks diversity is not important. Like, diversity to him gets in the way of the story. Like, it makes me think of how Darren Aronofsky defended only casting white people in Noah, and that he didn't want race to be a distraction in the movie. And that was like, race isn't a distraction. You just kind of suck. Races exist, right? Like, I mean, like, the concept of race is a social construct, but like the people who are assigned to that social construct, they're real people. They exist in the world, and they deserve their stories to be told as well. If he's just going to complain because they're, casting a diverse group of people, like, it's not like the Jedi all come from like a single hegemonic group in like, a white suburban neighborhood. They're Force users, or like they scour the galaxy for infant Force users and then bring them in to be trained, which, like, that is its own kind of unethical thing. Like, the Jedi are basically a cult that trains child warriors. Like, that's kind of my opinion on it. But if you're going throughout the galaxy and finding different people with Force abilities, of course they're going to be diverse. They're not all going to be white dudes.
It's, it always gets spun like, you don't care about diversity. I think these questions are so stupid. I don't think there should be any sort of concern about diversity. There should be concern about story. Pick the best person for the part. I don't think that there should be some...
Okay, yeah, well, why is the best person for the part always a white guy then? Like, you never complain about, oh, you should pick the best person for the part if it's all a white cast. Like, that's never brought up. It's only ever brought up when they start casting people who are of a different race or gender.
Sort of a checklist. Just do what you got to do to tell a story in Star Wars.
Yep.
Just like George did. What I'd say is I'm very proud.
George Lucas didn't have any black people in the original Star Wars, and he was criticized for it, and that's why we got Lando Calrissian. Lando Calrissian was created specifically because George Lucas was criticized for not having black people in space. And I don't think you would complain about the addition of Lando Calrissian. I don't know for a fact your opinion on Lando Calrissian, but I know everybody else's opinion on Lando Calrissian is that he's a cool motherfucker. So I have to imagine, especially because it's the era that you love, that you gotta love Lando as well, right? Like, that, I think that's a safe assumption to make, and that was deliberately a diversity choice to introduce that character as a response to criticism that his films weren't diverse enough.
Be the first woman to create, produce, direct, and showrun a Star Wars series. Obviously, Deborah Chow directed Obi-Wan, and many, many women have contributed to the films, but to be the person at the center of the narrative, the word that's coming to mind is it's a real honor. It's so special to me. I think it's a thing that is rare, and the fact that I get to be that person that is doing that, I think, is a testament to how much I love Star Wars, and how I would not stop until I got to make one. So it's a testament to that, and it's a testament to tenacity, and it's also a testament to how much I love this world, and how honored I am to be working on it. Well, good for you, man. I mean, you're doing your thing and you're following your dreams. That's awesome.
Okay, I know he said good for you, man, just as like a general, like, come on, man. Like I don't think he was deliberately like misgendering her. I just feel like he's being rude.
But at the end of the day, I just want it to be a good story. Have it created by AI for all I care. I don't.
Oh my god! I just talked about AI. Of course, he's somebody who he probably would love a slop Star Wars script created by AI. Oh god. Oh, I hate that that's probably true. Yeah, I just did an AI segment. Why are you doing this to me, man? Come on. I thought we were friends.
care. I think with the cast, honestly, there were just all the people that I wanted. I saw Squid Game and I had written this character and I had no idea who to cast and I had no idea who was going to be able to play all of these different levels. And then I thought about Squid Game and I was like, that's the guy, that's him. I don't know how I get in touch with this person. I don't know if they want to perform in English. Wait, so let me get this straight. She had a Squid Game binge and she was feeling it and she figured that he would be the best person for the role. And then when I worked with him, I was like,
yeah, that happens a lot. Like, writers often write a part with a specific actor in mind. And, like, they don't always get that actor. Like, and, you know, you can get somebody else to do it. But, like, that's very common for projects to be written with a specific actor in mind. And it's never a problem when it's a white person.
like, this is the best actor I've ever worked with. Watching him perform in English for the first time.
Oh, Luna says, don't forget his AI Luke Skywalker thing. That's right. I did a video on that. He was literally using AI deepfakes of Mark Hamill without Mark Hamill's permission. So yeah, of course he thinks AI is fine.
And tracking the emotional beats, doing so much of his own action. Obviously, we had an amazing stunt team that did the stunts. He did so much of his own action, which I had no idea he could do. And then somebody like Daphne Keane, I'd loved so much in Logan. I think she's a great character. You want to talk about a great actor? I think Daphne Keane's a great actor. And I was like, you know...
All right, I was worried for a second, but like Logan is so kind of universally loved as a movie that I have to imagine he'd be like, no, Logan was a good movie, so I like Daphne Keane.
What would be great? I'd love to see X-23 with a lightsaber. How do we make that happen? So that's what I would say about the diversity of the cast.
Oh my god, wait. Okay, just saying X-23 with a lightsaber. Like, I know Daphne Keane played X-23 and she's not going to be... Wouldn't it be cool to have like a lightsaber glove, like have Wolverine style lightsaber claws? You just put on the glove and you just comes out like they're, you know, lightsaber knuckles or something. That would be cool.
They were people that were essentially my first choice. I wrote this part that Charlie Barnett played, who I worked with on Russian Doll. This doesn't give too much away about the character, but he's such an A+ student. He's like A+ Jedi. And that's Charlie in real life. He's such a good actor and he wants to be really good. So when it came time to casting that character, you know, who would be just perfect as Charlie? I've seen him just do whatever it takes to get the scene. So to me, this kind of reads as just like, you know, she watched a bunch of films and she liked the characters and she just, you know, casted them, you know, instead of kind of like maybe going through like a process of seeing who, you know, maybe like some...
That's part of the process. Also, it's not like she thought of actors that she wanted and then didn't audition those parts. I'm pretty sure when you are casting like series regulars, there's like union requirements to audition for the part. But like you can encourage the people that you want to audition, and you know, if they audition, then you're like, okay, great, that's who I wanted to work with. And like I can see an argument for saying, well, you know, you should probably write the script and then see who shows up for it. It's not like everybody that she had in mind that she was casting were like A-list actors. I think it's fine for a creative to be like, I want to work with this person and then hire that person. And like directors who use the same actors in a lot of stuff, like Christopher Nolan, like I understand that, because once you have built a rapport with certain people, you know each other's working style and you get it down to a science basically. You want to keep working with them in other projects. That's what Christopher Nolan does. He just kind of has like an acting troupe that he works with because they know each other's style really well, and you know they have built up you know, levels of communication and trust with each other over years and years and years of making films together. Like I get that makes sense to me. That's not necessarily like a, oh well, you're not giving other people a chance thing. It can be, but I understand where that's coming from, and that's not a negative thing from a creative standpoint.
Somebody who's no name could come in and you know, really steal the scene. take the part. I don't really know. Maybe they did do that, but
I'm sure they auditioned for all of these roles, and if somebody came in who brought something that they weren't expecting, or like, you know, blew them away, it may very well have been that they'll be like, oh, let's go with this person instead. That happens. So I wasn't in the casting room. I don't know how that process took place. I'm just saying it feels like he's looking for things to nitpick here, which, to be fair, I'm watching a Star Wars theory video looking for things to nitpick. So I guess turnabout's fair play.
To me, it just kind of seems like, you know, she was watching some stuff that she liked, and she's like, hey, you know, that would be cool to have this person on. That'd be cool to have that person on. But it seems like she took that from a professional standpoint in terms of their acting, and wasn't just, you know, like fangirling over these characters or these actors. So yeah, I mean, the people she chose, yeah, I think Lee Jung-jae is fine actor. I wouldn't say he's the best actor in the world. I'm sure there are many qualified.
I've never seen Squid Game, so I don't know what kind of an actor he is. I don't know that there even is, like, when he said, I'm sure he's not the best actor in the world, like, why even say that? Like, I don't really think anybody's the best actor in the world. Like, because I don't think there's like one thing where it's like somebody is better than every other actor at every other aspect of acting, right? But like, even if that were the case, there's only one of those people, and they're probably too busy to do a Star Wars TV show.
Actors out there who could perform a great job playing any of these characters. Daphne Keane, I think, is really fantastic. I think she had so much range in Logan, and she was so young that probably her acting has just developed over time. So that's definitely a character that I'm very excited to see on screen playing in The Acolyte. She's probably the Acolyte, to be honest. It's probably what's going to happen. But as for all this, look, I was one of the first people, I think I was the first person on YouTube to continuously talk about how excited I am for The Acolyte years ago, when we got a hint of it coming out, that we're going to be getting a show about this. And I have to say, I'm not a huge fan of the things that Leslie Headland has said regarding George Lucas or Star Wars in general.
What has she said about George Lucas? Like, was it something that I missed that was in this article, or are you talking about other things?
I'm not a huge fan of the things that her actors have said regarding Star Wars being a patriarchy and all of this nonsense. But at the end of the day, it's still...
I mean, okay, yeah, so it is just sexism. All right.
Still very capable for people like this to create something that is very akin to Star Wars and very good. I don't want to get ahead of myself and say that that's exactly what it's going to be, but I really am a student of patience, of waiting and not jumping the gun. I would really like to wait and see and be hopeful that this is going to be a really well-made project with Dave Filoni having overseen things. That being said, am I skeptical? You bet your booty I am. So, hey, we're going to go through it together. We're going to see what happens. It's just a few months away now, so cross your fingers.
Do you have anything more to say? What do you got?
Hope you all have a great day. Let me know what you think.
Okay, he's wrapping up. Yeah, all right. So anyway, okay. So those are his thoughts on the interview. It really does seem like he has some sexism under the surface that he's trying to keep in check, because he got canceled for that before when he was too overt with it. But like, it's coming out. He was complaining about, like, oh, the actors were talking about the patriarchy, blah blah blah. Like, yeah, patriarchy exists. But yeah, oh, and Linda Rose says he doesn't jump the gun. Red Saber means Sith. Yeah. No, I thought about that, but I didn't say it. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Like, he is jumping the gun. He's like, well, all of these people have to die because they saw a red lightsaber and it's not Darth Maul. So otherwise, that line from Phantom Menace will be discounted because red saber means Sith. Anyway, why is this guy the largest Star Wars YouTuber? It should be me, is all I'm saying. Hey, thanks for watching. Your view means a lot. Don't forget to toss me a like and subscribe and ring the bell. And drop a comment below telling me what you thought of the video. I stream Mondays and Fridays at 5 p.m. Pacific, so catch me live and join in on the convo. You can find all my socials in the description below, and thank you to all my patrons, with a very special shout out to my Whale Shark tier patrons Ryan D and James Knight, and my Anemone Friend tier patron Piftle Cakes. Your support means the world. Catch you next time.